Billionaire forgot his black card to test his Maid, but what she bought broke his heart. Subscribe to The Maid Secret for more stories. Don't risk missing the next story. Follow, comment, and share. Let's begin. The morning light filtered through the 20-foot windows of the Anderson estate, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. It was 5:30 a.m., and Elena Morales had already been awake for an hour. She moved silently through the mansion's west wing, her uniform perfectly pressed, her movements precise and practiced. 6 years of service had taught her the rhythm of this house, when to be visible and when to disappear. "Good morning, Ms. Morales." Elena turned to find Harrison Reed, head of security, his expression as impassive as always. She nodded politely. "Mr. Reed, Mr. Anderson will be returning from Tokyo this afternoon. He's requested the house be immaculate." His eyes narrowed slightly, particularly the study. Elena understood the unspoken message. When Daniel Anderson specified areas to be perfect, it meant he would be inspecting them personally. "Of course, I'll see to it immediately." Reed lingered a moment too long before walking away. Elena had grown accustomed to the subtle scrutiny from Anderson's staff. As the only live-in maid who had lasted more than 2 years, she had become something of an anomaly. The others watched her, waiting for a mistake, a reason why she had survived the billionaire's notorious perfectionism, when so many others had failed. But Elena had her own reasons for staying, reasons she kept locked away like the family photographs she still kept in her small quarters above the garage. The Anderson mansion sprawled across 8 acres of Westchester County's most exclusive real estate. At 42, Daniel Anderson had built his fortune in tech security systems, then doubled it in venture capital. Forbes had called him brilliantly paranoid, a trait that manifested in the cameras discreetly positioned throughout his home, recording every movement, every conversation. Elena worked methodically through the morning, restocking the imported mineral water he preferred, arranging fresh flowers in the precise configurations detailed in the household manual, and finally, tackling the study. Here, she moved with extra care. The room contained priceless first editions, artifacts from his travels, and the large mahogany desk where he conducted much of his business. As she dusted between leather-bound volumes, Elena's thoughts drifted to her sister Lucia's phone call the night before. Their mother's medication costs had increased again. Between that and Lucia's son's upcoming school tuition payment, they were falling behind. Elena had promised to send more from her next paycheck, though she was already living on the barest minimum herself. The prodigal employer returns. The voice from the doorway startled her. Sophia Winters, Anderson's executive assistant, stood watching, tablet in hand. At 35, Sophia embodied polished efficiency in her tailored suit and sleek bob. Unlike Reed's cold assessment, Sophia's gaze held something more calculating. "He's in a mood," Sophia continued, scrolling through her device. "The Tokyo deal fell through. Something about ethical concerns." She said the last 2 words as though they were a particularly distasteful food. "He fired Jensen during the flight home." Elena absorbed this information silently. Jensen had been Anderson's driver for 3 years. His daughter had just started college. "Thank you for letting me know," Elena replied, keeping her voice neutral. Information in this house was currency, and Sophia never shared it without purpose. Sophia smiled thinly. "Just thought you should prepare. Oh, and Elena, he mentioned a dinner party this weekend, very exclusive, 4 guests." She paused. "He specifically requested you serve. Alone." After Sophia left, Elena returned to her work, mind racing. In 6 years, Anderson had never specifically requested her presence at one of his private functions. These intimate dinners were reserved for his highest priority business associates or potential investments. Why would he want her there now? At precisely 3:17 p.m., the security system announced Mr. Anderson's arrival. Elena remained in the kitchen, preparing his post-flight preference, a specific blend of green tea served exactly at 108 degrees. She heard his voice in the foyer, the sharp cadence that indicated displeasure. Footsteps approached, his distinctive stride unhurried yet purposeful. Daniel Anderson appeared in the doorway, his tall frame impeccably dressed despite 20 hours of travel. At 42, his dark hair showed threads of silver at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened since his wife's death 5 years ago. Those eyes, steel gray and observant, missed nothing. "Ms. Morales." His voice carried the slight raspiness of fatigue. "Mr. Anderson." Elena placed the tea on a silver tray. "Welcome home." He studied her for a moment, then glanced around the kitchen. "The house looks exceptional as always." Thank you, sir. Most conversations with Anderson ended there. A brief acknowledgement of satisfactory service, then dismissal. But today he lingered, watching as she arranged a small plate of the almond biscuits he preferred with his tea. "I've decided to host a small gathering Saturday evening," he said finally. "Dinner for 4 guests. Very important potential partners." "Yes, sir. Ms. Winters mentioned it. I'll prepare everything accordingly. I want you to handle it personally. No outside catering staff." He took the tea she offered. "And I'll need you to serve throughout the evening." Elena nodded, keeping her expression carefully neutral despite her confusion. "Of course, sir." Anderson seemed about to say something else when his phone chimed. He checked it, his expression darkening. "I'll be in my study. No interruptions for the next 3 hours." After he left, Elena exhaled slowly. In the 6 years she had worked for Daniel Anderson, she had learned to read the subtle shifts in his demeanor. Something was different. The request for her exclusive service at the dinner was unusual, but it was his lingering attention that concerned her more. Daniel Anderson didn't notice people unless they made mistakes, or unless he needed something from them. The question was, what did he need from her now? That evening, after completing her duties, Elena retreated to her quarters. The small apartment above the garage was modest but comfortable, the one place in the Anderson estate where she could truly be herself. She kicked off her shoes and called her sister. "How's Mama today?" Elena asked, sinking into her worn armchair. "Better," Lucia replied, though her voice suggested otherwise. "The doctor wants to adjust her medication again. More expenses? Don't worry about it, Elena. We'll manage. I get paid next week. I'll send extra." "You already send too much," Lucia protested. "You should be saving for your own future, not—" "Family first," Elena interrupted gently. "Always." After the call, Elena opened her laptop and resumed work on her online business management course. 4 more months and she would have her certificate. The irony wasn't lost on her. Learning to manage businesses while cleaning for a business magnate. But education had been her mother's most fervent wish for her daughters. When circumstances had forced Elena to abandon college to support her family, she had promised herself it was only temporary. 6 years later, that promise was becoming harder to keep. A notification pinged on her phone, an alert from the household management system. Mr. Anderson had scheduled a 7 a.m. meeting in his study and requested coffee service. Unusual for a Saturday when he typically slept until 9. Elena closed her textbook and prepared for bed, unaware that across the estate Daniel Anderson sat in his study, watching the surveillance feed from earlier that day. He rewound the footage, studying Elena as she worked, her movements efficient, her expression composed even when she thought no one was watching. On his desk lay a black credit card and a detailed report on Elena Morales' financial history. His security team had compiled it months ago, standard procedure for all staff with access to his private spaces. The report showed modest bank accounts, regular transfers to family members in California, no debt apart from a small student loan now dormant. Anderson tapped the edge of the black card against his desk, thinking, tomorrow would reveal what 6 years of background checks and surveillance couldn't tell him. Whether Elena Morales was truly as exceptional as she appeared, or simply better at hiding her true nature than the others had been. Either way, by Sunday morning, he would know exactly who was cleaning his home. The next morning arrived with a steady rainfall that cast the mansion in gloomy shadows. Elena arrived at Anderson's study at 6:55 a.m., a silver tray balanced perfectly in her hands. The coffee was prepared precisely as he preferred. Black Ethiopian blend, no sugar, a splash of non-dairy creamer on the side. She knocked softly. "Enter," Anderson's voice commanded. Inside, he sat behind his desk surrounded by 3 open laptops and numerous documents. He had the focused intensity that Elena recognized from his most important business dealings. "Your coffee, sir," she said, placing it on the one clear corner of his desk. "Thank you." He didn't look up from his work. "I'll need the silver service set prepared for tonight's dinner. The Venetian crystal for the wine." "Yes, sir. I've already begun preparations." Now he did look up, his gray eyes studying her with that same unsettling attention from yesterday. "The guest list has changed. It will be 5, not 4. I'll adjust accordingly." Anderson nodded, then deliberately shifted his attention to a document. A clear dismissal. Elena turned to leave when his voice stopped her. "Ms. Morales." She paused. "Yes, sir? How long have you been with this household now?" The question surprised her. 6 years next month, sir." A flicker of something crossed his face. Surprise, perhaps, or confirmation. 6 years, he repeated. Longer than anyone else. Elena remained silent, Unsure if a response was expected, Anderson returned to his document. That will be all. As Elena closed the study door behind her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just transpired. Though she couldn't identify what, she headed toward the kitchen to continue preparations for the evening, her mind preoccupied with the strange interaction. She didn't notice the gleam of black plastic beneath the silver tray where she had placed Anderson's coffee. Would she find it when she returned to clear the service? And if she did, what would Elena Morales do with a billionaire's unlimited black card accidentally left in her care? The surveillance cameras continued their silent watch, recording every movement, every expression, as the test Daniel Anderson had orchestrated began to unfold. Elena returned to Anderson's study an hour later to collect the coffee service. The room was empty, the laptops closed and neatly aligned. She carefully arranged the cup and saucer on the tray, then froze as her eyes caught the unmistakable gleam of black beneath. A credit card. Not just any credit card. Anderson's Centurion card. She picked it up, her pulse quickening. The matte black surface felt heavy in her hand, the embossed numbers catching the light. This was the legendary black card. Invitation only. No spending limit. A symbol of wealth so extreme it had become mythical among the staff. Elena glanced at the doorway, then at the ceiling corner where she knew a camera was positioned. 6 years of working in this house had taught her that nothing was ever truly private, especially not in Anderson's study. "Mr. Anderson left his card," she said aloud, knowing the security team would be monitoring. She placed it prominently on the tray and carried everything out. In the kitchen, Elena placed the card on the counter and called Reed's office extension. "Security," he answered brusquely. "Mr. Reed, this is Elena Morales. Mr. Anderson left his black credit card in the study. Where would you like me to put it for safekeeping?" A pause. "Mr. Anderson is currently in a conference call. I'll inform him when he's finished. Should I bring it to your office?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No. Keep it secure until he requests it." The call ended, leaving Elena perplexed. Standard protocol was to immediately secure any personal items belonging to Anderson, especially something as valuable as his credit card. Reed's deviation from procedure was unusual. Elena wrapped the card in a clean cloth and placed it in the pocket of her uniform. Throughout the morning, she waited for Reed to call back or for Anderson to request his card. Neither happened. By afternoon, as she prepared for the evening's dinner, Elena's suspicion grew. This felt deliberate. The careful placement, Reed's unusual instructions, Anderson's failure to inquire about a missing premium credit card. It wasn't coincidence. It was a test. The realization settled over her as she polished the Venetian crystal for the evening. 6 years without incident, without a single item missing or damaged, and now suddenly Anderson's most valuable credit card appears unattended. She thought of Jensen, the driver fired mid-flight, of the housekeeper before her who had lasted barely 6 months, of the gardener dismissed after accepting an expensive bottle of wine from a guest. Anderson's world operated on absolute loyalty and zero temptation. Now her loyalty was being tested. Elena continued working, the card a constant presence in her pocket. As she arranged fresh flowers in the dining room, Sophia appeared in the doorway. "Everything on schedule?" she asked, eyeing the elaborate table setting. "Yes. Everything is prepared according to specifications." Sophia nodded, then leaned against the doorframe with unusual casualness. "I heard Anderson's card went missing this morning." Elena stiffened slightly. "Not missing. He left it in the study. Mr. Reed knows." Interesting that Reed didn't take it for safekeeping. Sophia's tone was deliberately light. "A card like that could buy a small house in a single transaction. No limit. I'm sure Mr. Anderson will request it when he needs it." "Absolutely." Sophia smiled. "After all, if anyone understands responsibility, it's you, Elena. Always sending money home, supporting your family from afar. Such dedication." The pointed reference to her family's financial situation wasn't subtle. Elena met Sophia's gaze directly. "Was there something else you needed, Ms. Winters?" Sophia straightened. "Just checking on dinner preparations. Carry on." After Sophia left, Elena touched the pocket where the card rested. The implication was clear. They were watching to see what she would do. Perhaps they even expected her to fail this test. The evening's dinner service proceeded flawlessly. Anderson entertained his guests, 4 tech executives from competing companies, with practiced charm. Elena served each course with professional precision, her presence nearly invisible as the powerful men discussed potential partnerships. Anderson never once mentioned the missing card. By 11, the guests had departed, and Elena had cleaned the kitchen to its usual immaculate state. Anderson remained in his study, the light visible beneath the door as she passed on her final rounds. In her quarters, Elena removed the card from her pocket and placed it on her small dining table. She stared at it, thinking of her mother's medication, of her nephew's tuition, of Lucia's exhaustion as she worked double shifts. One transaction could solve all their problems, and cost her everything she'd worked for. Elena picked up her phone and dialed her sister. "Everything okay?" Lucia answered, her voice thick with sleep. "I'm sorry to wake you, Elena paused. "I wanted to hear your voice. What's wrong? You sound strange." Elena stared at the black card. "If you could fix everything, all our problems, but you had to do something wrong to do it, would you?" A long silence followed. "This isn't about money, is it?" "Elena, whatever you're thinking." "It's hypothetical," Elena said quickly. "Just something I've been pondering. Mom didn't raise us to take shortcuts," Lucia said finally. "She used to say dignity can't be purchased but can be sold too cheaply." After the call ended, Elena sat looking at the card until nearly midnight. Then she made a decision. The next morning, Elena arrived at Anderson's study at precisely 7 a.m. with his coffee. He acknowledged her with a nod, absorbed in his tablet. She placed the coffee on his desk, then deliberately reached into her pocket and removed the black card. "Your credit card, sir," she said, placing it beside the saucer. "You left it yesterday." Anderson looked up, his expression unreadable. "Did I?" He picked up the card, examining it as if seeing it for the first time. "And you've had it since then?" "Yes, sir. I informed Mr. Reed immediately." "I see." He slipped the card into his suit pocket. "And you didn't use it?" The directness of the question confirmed her suspicions. "No, sir. Most people would have been tempted." "I'm not most people, sir." Anderson studied her for a long moment. "No, it appears you're not." He returned to his tablet. "That will be all, Ms. Morales." Elena left the study, certain she had passed whatever test Anderson had devised. Relief mingled with a strange disappointment. Was that all? 6 years of service and trust came down to a simple binary test of not stealing? As she turned the corner, Reed stepped into her path. "A moment, Ms. Morales." Elena followed him to the security office, where he gestured to a chair opposite his desk. On his computer screen, she saw footage of herself, in the kitchen, placing the card in her pocket. "Explain this," Reed demanded. "Mr. Anderson left his card in the study. I secured it until I could return it to him directly, as per your instructions yesterday." Reed's eyes narrowed. "And between yesterday morning and today, did you use the card?" "No. We'll need to verify that." He typed briefly. "The card shows a transaction from last night, 9:37 p.m. Care to explain?" Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible. The card never left my possession. Yet a transaction occurred while you were in possession of it." Reed turned the screen toward her, displaying a charge for $1,182.50 at Memorial Children's Hospital. "I didn't. You were given a simple test, Ms. Morales. A test everyone fails." Reed's voice hardened. "Mr. Anderson will want to speak with you personally before your termination." As Reed escorted her back toward Anderson's study, Elena's mind raced. A donation to a children's hospital? She hadn't made any transactions. The card had remained in her quarters all night. Unless... The study door opened, revealing Anderson standing behind his desk, waiting. His expression was severe, his posture rigid. "Thank you, Reed. Leave us." When the door closed, Anderson gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Elena remained standing. "Sir, I did not use your card. I don't know how that transaction occurred, but it wasn't by my hand." "I know." The simple response caught her off guard. "You? No?" "I know because I made the donation myself, remotely. The card never left my digital wallet, Ms. Morales. The physical card was a duplicate." Understanding dawned slowly. It was all a setup. "A test," Anderson corrected. "One designed to be failed. The real test wasn't whether you'd take the card, it was what you'd do with it if you did." "I don't understand," Elena said, her voice steady despite the confusion churning inside her. Anderson moved around his desk and leaned against the front edge, arms crossed. "Every person who works in my home is tested, Ms. Morales. Different methods, different temptations, but always with the same result. They fail." His expression remained neutral, clinical. "Some take cash from my wallet. Others help themselves to wine from the cellar. A few have attempted online purchases they thought couldn't be traced." He gestured to the chair again, and this time Elena sat. You're the first to return the card unused, he continued, which is why I found it necessary to escalate the test by framing me for a donation I didn't make, Elena said, anger beginning to replace confusion. By creating a scenario where you would believe you were being framed, Anderson corrected. I wanted to see your reaction, your true character under pressure. Elena straightened in her chair. And did I pass your test now, Mr. Anderson? Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of what might have been respect. You did, but the test isn't over. He returned to his chair and tapped his tablet. The wall screen behind him illuminated with her personnel file, followed by surveillance footage. Elena in the kitchen, in the hallways, in the garden. Years of her life at the Anderson estate compressed into a montage of silent service. 6 years, Anderson said. No infractions, no complaints, perfect performance reviews. You're an anomaly, Ms. Morales. I'm good at my job. You're exceptional at it. The question is why? He leaned forward. Most people in your position would have moved on by now. Better opportunities, higher wages. Yet you stay, sending nearly 40% of your salary to your family in California each month. Your sister, Lucia, correct? Your mother with her medical expenses. Your nephew's education. Elena's hands tightened in her lap. You've been monitoring my financial transactions. I monitor everything in my domain. His tone suggested this was perfectly reasonable. What intrigues me is your dedication. Such selflessness is unusual. It's family, Elena said simply. Nothing unusual about that. Anderson studied her with those penetrating gray eyes. Perhaps there's more to Elena Morales than meets the eye. He stood suddenly. You're dismissed for now, but our conversation isn't finished. As Elena walked toward the door, he added, the Memorial Children's Hospital donation, that specific hospital, was an interesting choice, wasn't it? She paused, hand on the doorknob. Sir, if you had used the card, would you have chosen that particular hospital? His question seemed casual, yet his gaze was anything but. Elena held his gaze. I didn't use the card, Mr. Anderson, so I suppose we'll never know. For the next 3 days, Elena continued her duties as if nothing had changed, though everything had. She felt the weight of increased scrutiny, Reed's suspicious glances, Sophia's pointed questions about Anderson's unusual interest in her. On Wednesday afternoon, Elena was polishing silver in the kitchen when Anderson appeared unexpectedly. I have another dinner meeting this evening, he announced. 4 guests. Same arrangement as before. Yes, sir. I'll prepare immediately. And Ms. Morales? He hesitated, something unusual for him. I've authorized a company car to take you into the city tomorrow. You have the day off. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Elena staring after him in confusion. In 6 years, Anderson had never given her an unexpected day off, much less offered transportation. That evening's dinner proceeded smoothly. Tech investors again, discussions of market shares and acquisition potential. Elena served efficiently, invisible as always, though she occasionally felt Anderson's gaze following her movements. As she cleared the dessert plates, one guest, a silver-haired man with shrewd eyes, paused his conversation to address her directly. Excellent service tonight, he commented. Daniel always surrounds himself with the best. Thank you, sir, Elena replied, the standard response to the rare guest who acknowledged staff. Ms. Morales has been with me for 6 years, Anderson said, an unusual departure from his typical disregard of service staff during business discussions. Her attention to detail is unparalleled. The silver-haired man raised an eyebrow. 6 years? That must be a record for you, Daniel. He chuckled. You're normally so quick to discard people when they disappoint you. Elena continued her work, pretending not to hear the uncomfortable truth in the man's words. Only those who failed to meet my standards, Anderson replied coolly. Ms. Morales has exceeded them consistently. The compliment, so unexpected, nearly caused Elena to drop the crystal glass she was collecting. She maintained her composure, finished clearing the table, and retreated to the kitchen. Later that night, as she completed her final tasks, Sophia approached. Anderson wants to see you in the study before you leave. Elena wiped her hands on a towel. Did he say what about? No, but he's been acting strange since Tokyo. Sophia's expression was calculating. First the card test, now private meetings. If I didn't know better, I'd think our employer has developed an interest in you. That's ridiculous, Elena said firmly. Is it? Sophia's smile didn't reach her eyes. 6 years is a long time to go unnoticed, Elena. What changed? The question lingered, as Elena made her way to the study. She knocked softly. Enter, Anderson called. Inside, the lighting was dimmer than usual. Anderson stood by the window, looking out at the night-shrouded grounds, a glass of scotch in his hand. "You wanted to see me, sir?" He turned, his expression unreadable in the half-light. "Tomorrow the car will take you to Memorial Children's Hospital, 9 a.m. Elena stiffened. "May I ask why?" "Because I'll be meeting you there." He took a sip of his scotch. "There's something I need to understand. Sir, if this is still about the card, it's about why that specific hospital would have been your choice." His tone left no room for argument. 9 a.m., Ms. Morales. Dress casually. The following morning, a sleek black sedan waited in the circular driveway as Elena emerged from her quarters. The driver, not Jensen's replacement, but someone new, opened the door without a word. During the 40-minute drive into Manhattan, Elena's mind raced. Why Memorial Children's Hospital? What did Anderson hope to learn by taking her there? And how could he possibly know it would have been her choice when she'd never used the card? The car pulled up to the hospital's main entrance where Anderson stood waiting, looking strangely approachable in dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater instead of his usual suit. "Ms. Morales," he greeted her as she stepped from the car. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" The question slipped out before she could censor it. To her surprise, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "We all have choices. That's rather the point of today's exercise." He led her into the hospital and through a series of corridors until they reached the pediatric oncology wing. A plaque beside the entrance read, "The Katherine Anderson Memorial Wing," and beneath it, a portrait of a beautiful woman with Anderson's same gray eyes. Elena glanced at her employer, understanding dawning. "Your wife?" Anderson nodded once, his expression tightly controlled. "Katherine died 5 years ago. Cancer. This wing was dedicated in her memory." "I'm sorry," Elena said quietly. "I didn't know. Few do. I prefer to keep my private affairs private." He gestured toward the wing. "This is where the donation was made in your name. A very specific choice, wouldn't you say?" Before Elena could respond, a nurse approached, her face lighting with recognition. "Mr. Anderson, we weren't expecting you today." She turned to Elena with a warm smile. "And you must be Ms. Morales. The children have been asking when you'd visit again." Elena froze, confusion written across her face. Anderson's expression remained impassive, though his eyes narrowed slightly. "I believe you're mistaking Ms. Morales for someone else," he said smoothly. The nurse frowned, looking between them. "Oh, I'm so sorry. You look just like—" She stopped herself, embarrassed. "My apologies. There's a volunteer who comes monthly. The resemblance is striking." After the nurse hurried away, Anderson turned to Elena, suspicion evident in his gaze. "An interesting coincidence." "Very," Elena agreed, her heart pounding. They continued walking through the wing, passing children's rooms decorated with colorful artwork. Anderson stopped at a small playroom where several young patients were engaged in various activities. "Katherine loved children," he said quietly. "We were planning to start a family when she was diagnosed. Terminal, stage 4. 6 months later, she was gone." The raw pain in his voice surprised Elena. In 6 years, she had never heard him speak of his late wife, had never witnessed this vulnerability. "The donations to this hospital," Anderson continued, "they matter. They save lives, fund research, ensure other families don't experience what I did." He turned to face her fully, "Which is why I find it curious that this specific hospital would appear in our little scenario." Elena met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps whoever set up the transaction knew of your connection to this place. Perhaps." His eyes never left hers. "Or perhaps there's another connection I'm missing." A child's laugh interrupted the tense moment. A small girl with a colorful headscarf had entered the playroom, accompanied by a woman whose back was to them. When the woman turned, Elena's carefully maintained composure cracked. It was Lucia, her sister, who should have been in California, not New York. Anderson noticed her reaction immediately. "Ms. Morales, you look as though you've seen a ghost." Elena couldn't respond, couldn't tear her eyes away from her sister, who was now helping the little girl with an art project. "Elena?" Lucia had spotted her. Surprise, then alarm flashed across her face as she registered not only Elena's presence, but the man standing beside her. "What is happening here?" Anderson demanded quietly. Elena took a deep breath. "Mr. Anderson, I'd like you to meet my sister, Lucia Morales." The silence that followed seemed to stretch endlessly. Anderson's gaze darted between Elena and Lucia, his expression cycling through confusion, suspicion, and finally a cold understanding. "Your sister," he repeated flatly. Who should be in California? Mr. Anderson? Elena began. Not here. He cut her off, his voice low but commanding. Ms. Morales? Lucia? A word, please? Lucia whispered something to the little girl, who nodded and continued her artwork. As Lucia approached, Elena saw the fear in her sister's eyes, the silent question. What have you done? Anderson led them to a small consultation room off the main corridor, closing the door firmly behind them. The moment they were alone, he turned to Elena, his composure restored but tension radiating from him. Explain, he demanded. Now. Elena glanced at Lucia, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Lucia has been volunteering here for nearly 4 years, Elena began. Since moving to New York. 4 years, Anderson repeated. And the money you send to California? Goes to our mother, Elena answered. She does live in California. The rest of what you know is true. Her medical needs, my nephew's education costs. Just not where your sister lives. His voice was dangerously quiet. Why the deception? Why lie about your sister's location for 4 years? Lucia stepped forward. It wasn't Elena's idea. It was mine. Her voice, so like Elena's but more direct, filled the small room. When Elena got the job with you, we researched your methods, your surveillance, your tests, how you monitored your staff's personal lives. Anderson's eyes narrowed. You researched me. We protected ourselves, Lucia corrected. Elena needed the job, the stability, the housing, the salary. But we knew if you discovered our connection to this hospital, you might view it as a conflict of interest. A conflict of. Anderson stopped, understanding dawning. Catherine's wing. You work in my wife's memorial wing. Elena nodded. Lucia volunteers here 2 days a week. She works at NYU Medical Center full-time as a pediatric nurse. I started volunteering after seeing a notice about the new wing, Lucia explained. I didn't know about your connection to Elena until afterward. By then it felt too complicated to explain. Anderson paced the small room, hands clasped behind his back, processing this revelation. So, for 4 years, you've maintained this fiction. The devoted maid sending money across the country to her struggling family. He stopped suddenly, turning to Elena. The nurse who greeted us, she recognized you. Elena hesitated, then nodded. I sometimes visit Lucia here on my days off, in a hospital wing funded by your employer, without ever mentioning it. His tone wasn't accusatory, merely stating facts. You must have known this would eventually come to light. We hoped it wouldn't matter after enough time had passed, Lucia said. That Elena's work record would speak for itself. Anderson focused his attention on Lucia. And you just happened to volunteer in Catherine's wing specifically, out of the entire hospital. A tense silence followed. It wasn't coincidence, Elena admitted finally. Lucia chose this wing deliberately. Because of the connection to you, yes, but not for the reason you're thinking. Lucia moved closer to her sister, their shoulders touching in silent solidarity. When I learned this wing was named for your wife, I wanted to understand the man my sister worked for. The man who built a children's cancer ward but fired employees for the smallest infractions. Something flashed in Anderson's eyes. Anger, perhaps, or something deeper. You had no right to pry into my personal affairs. You monitor my sister's bank transactions and phone calls, Lucia countered. I'd say privacy boundaries were already crossed. Elena placed a restraining hand on her sister's arm. This confrontational approach wouldn't help. Mr. Anderson, we never meant any disrespect. The work Lucia does here honors your wife's memory. The children adore her. And the donation? He asked sharply. The one supposedly made in your name. You knew exactly which hospital I would see on that statement, didn't you? I didn't make that donation, Elena repeated. But yes, if I had been given an unlimited card with no consequences, this hospital would have been my first thought. She met his gaze steadily. Not because of manipulation or calculation, but because I've seen the work done here. I've seen the children who benefit. Anderson studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned abruptly and opened the door. We're done here. The car will take you back to the estate, Ms. Morales. I expect you to resume your normal duties tomorrow. And Lucia? Elena asked. Your sister's volunteer work is her own business. His voice was cool, detached once more. As long as it doesn't interfere with your performance. With that, he walked away, leaving the sisters alone in the small room. Lucia exhaled shakily. That could have gone better. Or much worse, Elena replied, watching Anderson's retreating figure. Something had changed in those final moments. A shift she couldn't quite identify. I should go. Elena, Lucia caught her hand. Be careful. Men like that, when they discover they've been deceived even for good reasons, they don't forget. When Elena returned to the estate, an unexpected silence greeted her. No sign of Reed or his security team, no Sophia with her calculating glances. The mansion felt emptier than usual, the afternoon sunlight casting long shadows through the grand windows. She retreated to her quarters, mind racing with possibilities. Would Anderson fire her now? The deception, however well-intentioned, had been deliberate. For a man who valued absolute loyalty and transparency from his staff, this revelation might be unforgivable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucia. "Everything okay?" Elena typed back, "Not sure yet. We'll call later." She spent the evening in tense anticipation, expecting a summons that never came. By midnight, exhaustion overtook worry, and she fell into a troubled sleep. The next morning, Elena resumed her duties as scheduled. The house remained unusually quiet. Anderson had no appointments on the calendar, no meetings that required her service. She worked methodically through her tasks, the uncertainty of her situation hanging over her like a shadow. It was late afternoon when Sophia finally appeared, tablet in hand. "There you are," she said, as if Elena had been hiding rather than working in her usual areas. "Anderson wants to see you. Study. Now." Elena steeled herself. "Is this about yesterday?" Sophia's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "Your little field trip? I wouldn't know. He's been locked in there since returning, speaking to no one." A hint of irritation colored her tone. Anderson's sudden secretiveness clearly rankled his assistant. The walk to the study felt longer than usual. Elena knocked, heard the familiar enter, and stepped inside. Anderson sat behind his desk, papers arranged in precise stacks before him. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than usual. "Close the door," he instructed. Elena complied, then stood waiting, hands clasped before her. "I've spent the last 24 hours investigating you and your sister more thoroughly," he began without preamble. "Interesting what one finds when looking beyond the surface. Sir, if this is about our deception, this is about understanding Miss Morales." He pushed a folder across the desk. "Your sister has done remarkable work at the hospital. The children in that wing speak of Miss Lucia with genuine affection. The staff considers her invaluable, despite her limited hours." Elena remained silent, unsure where this was leading. "I also discovered something else," Anderson continued. "Monthly anonymous donations to the hospital's patient assistance fund, small amounts varying between $50 and $200, depending on the month, traced back to your personal account." Elena's shoulders tensed. "Those were private." "Nothing is truly private in the digital age," he replied, "especially not for someone with my resources." He stood and moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "You've been donating a portion of the money you could ill afford to spare, money that could have gone to your mother's care or your nephew's education." "Those donations were my choice," Elena said quietly. "Why?" The simple question hung in the air between them. When she didn't immediately respond, Anderson turned to face her. "Why donate anonymously to a hospital wing already well-funded by a billionaire? Why sacrifice from your limited resources when it would make no measurable difference?" The question seemed genuine, as if he truly couldn't comprehend her actions. "Because it matters," Elena answered finally. "Not the amount, but the act itself. Those children and their families, they're fighting battles most of us can't imagine. My small contribution won't save lives like your funding does, but it reminds me that we're all connected. That helping matters, even in small ways." Anderson studied her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "Your sister said something similar when I spoke with her this morning." Elena's head snapped up. "You spoke with Lucia?" "By phone. She was quite protective of you." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Threatened to expose my manipulative employment practices if I fired you over this." Despite everything, Elena felt a surge of affection for her fierce sister. Lucia has always been the outspoken one, so I gathered. Anderson returned to his desk but remained standing. "I don't appreciate being deceived, Ms. Morales. For 6 years you've maintained a fiction about your family situation. Only about Lucia's location," Elena corrected gently. "Everything else, my mother's illness, my support of my family, that was all true." Anderson acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Nevertheless, trust has been compromised. In my experience, that's usually irreparable." Elena's heart sank. Here it came, the dismissal she'd been expecting. "However," he continued, surprising her, "your actions during the card test remain relevant. You were presented with an opportunity that many would have seized without hesitation. You chose integrity. He paused, as did your sister, in her own way, dedicating her time to children she has no obligation to serve. I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Anderson, Elena said carefully. Are you saying I'm not fired? Anderson picked up a pen from his desk, turning it between his fingers, a rare display of restless energy from a man usually so controlled. I'm saying that I'm reassessing certain assumptions. He gestured for her to sit, another departure from their usual interactions. After a moment's hesitation, Elena took the chair across from him. 6 years ago, when Catherine died, Anderson began, his voice unusually quiet. Something in me hardened. I'd already been demanding, particular about who I allowed into my life, but after losing her, he trailed off, seeming to struggle with the admission. Trust became a luxury I could no longer afford. Elena remained silent, sensing he needed to continue without interruption. The tests, the black card, the cash left in drawers, the expensive items casually misplaced, they began as security measures. Eventually, they became confirmation of what I already believed. Everyone has a price. Everyone can be tempted. His gray eyes fixed on hers. Until you. I'm not special, Mr. Anderson. I simply did what was right. And therein lies the extraordinary, he replied. In a world where doing what's right has become the exception, rather than the rule. He set the pen down deliberately. Your deception about your sister troubles me, but your consistent character over 6 years carries more weight. Relief washed over Elena, followed immediately by caution. Anderson was being uncharacteristically philosophical, even vulnerable. She couldn't help but wonder what had prompted this change. There's something else, Anderson said, as if reading her thoughts. Something that came to light during my investigation yesterday. He opened a drawer and removed a small, worn photograph. Not a digital printout, but an actual photograph, its edges softened with age. He placed it on the desk, turning it to face her. Elena gasped softly. The photo showed a much younger Daniel Anderson standing beside Catherine. They were in a hospital corridor, Catherine in a wheelchair, both smiling despite the evident toll of her illness. Behind them, partially visible but unmistakable, was a young nurse, Lucia, with shorter hair, but the same determined expression. Your sister was there, Anderson said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. The final month of Catherine's treatment, she was newly graduated doing a rotation in oncology. Elena stared at the photograph, pieces falling into place. She never told me. Then, understanding fully, she didn't know who you were when I started working here. She made the connection later, when she saw my donation to establish Catherine's wing. Anderson confirmed. She remembered us from those final weeks. The weight of this revelation settled between them. Lucia had chosen to volunteer in that specific wing, not just because of Elena's employment connection, but because she had witnessed the Andersons' suffering firsthand. I've spent 6 years pushing people away, Anderson continued, his voice barely audible, testing them until they failed, confirming my worst assumptions about human nature. And all this time there was this connection, this thread linking back to Catherine. Elena looked up from the photograph to find Anderson watching her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Mr. Anderson, I don't know what to say. Neither do I, Ms. Morales. He almost smiled, which is unusual for me. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Without waiting for a response, Sophia entered, her expression tightly controlled but her eyes betraying surprise at finding Elena still employed and seemingly engaged in conversation with their employer. Sorry to interrupt, she said, not sounding sorry at all, but the Richardson Foundation called about tomorrow's gala. They need final confirmation of your attendance and whether you'll be bringing a +1. Anderson's professional mask slipped back into place. Confirm my attendance. No +1. Sophia nodded, her gaze sliding to Elena with undisguised curiosity before she departed, closing the door behind her. The Richardson Foundation, Elena said after a moment. They fund pediatric cancer research. Anderson looked mildly surprised. You're familiar with them? They partner with Memorial Children's Hospital. Their annual gala raises millions for research and family support programs. Anderson nodded slowly, something calculating entering his expression. Indeed. I've been a donor since Catherine's diagnosis, though I rarely attend their functions. He seemed to come to a decision. Ms. Morales, I'd like you to accompany me to the gala tomorrow evening. Elena blinked, certain she'd misheard. Sir? Not as staff, he clarified. As my guest. The request, for it was phrased as a request, not an order, left her momentarily speechless. That would be highly unusual. Yes, he agreed. It would. People would talk. Your business associates, the other staff. Let them. His tone suggested he'd made up his mind. The Richardson Gala celebrates those committed to fighting childhood cancer. Your sister volunteers. You donate what you can ill afford to spare. I'd say your presence is more fitting than most of the wealthy socialites who attend purely to be seen. Elena hesitated, torn between professional boundaries and the sincerity in Anderson's request. May I ask why? Anderson considered the question. Because something has shifted, Ms. Morales. After 6 years of distrust and distance, I find myself wanting to reconnect with Catherine's legacy, with the work that mattered to her. He paused, and perhaps with the capacity to see good in others that I once possessed. The vulnerability in his admission was disarming. This was not the cold, calculating billionaire who tested his staff and fired drivers mid-flight. This was a glimpse of the man Catherine had loved, emerging from behind carefully constructed walls. If you're uncomfortable with the idea, I understand, Anderson added when she remained silent. No, Elena said finally. I'd be honored to attend, though I don't have anything suitable to wear to such an event. That can be arranged. He checked his watch. Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. The car will take you into the city in the morning to select appropriate attire. My expense, of course. As Elena left the study, her mind whirled with the implications of what had just transpired. Not only had she kept her job despite the revealed deception, but Anderson was now inviting her to a high-profile charity event, as his guest, not his employee. What exactly had changed in Daniel Anderson? The following morning, Elena found herself in an exclusive boutique on Fifth Avenue, a discreet saleswoman presenting options, as requested by Mr. Anderson. The experience was surreal, being fitted for a gown worth more than 3 months of her salary, selecting accessories she would never have dared approach under normal circumstances. She chose a midnight blue gown, elegant but understated. If she was to attend this gala alongside Anderson, she would do so with dignity, not flash. Back at the estate by mid-afternoon, Elena returned to her quarters to prepare. As she styled her hair into a simple updo, her phone buzzed with a text from Lucia. A gala? With him? Elena, what is happening? Elena smiled at her sister's reaction. I'm not entirely sure myself, I'll explain later. Another text followed immediately. Be careful. Men like Anderson don't change overnight. Whatever he's playing at, protect yourself. Lucia's warning lingered as Elena finished preparing. Her sister wasn't wrong. This sudden shift in Anderson's behavior was puzzling, perhaps even concerning. Was it possible that their connection to Catherine had genuinely affected him? Or was this another, more elaborate test? At precisely 6:30, Elena made her way to the main house. She found Anderson in the foyer, impeccable in a tailored tuxedo, his silver-streaked dark hair combed neatly back. For a moment he didn't notice her. Then he turned and something in his expression shifted. Ms. Morales, he said, his voice softer than usual. You look lovely. Thank you, sir. She smoothed the fabric of her gown, suddenly self-conscious. And thank you for the dress, it's beautiful. Elena, he said, surprising her with the use of her first name. Tonight, I think we can dispense with the formalities. Please call me Daniel. Before she could respond, Reed appeared from the security office, stopping abruptly when he saw them together. His expression betrayed momentary confusion before settling into careful neutrality. Sir, the car is ready, he announced, pointedly avoiding looking at Elena in her evening attire. Thank you, Reed. Anderson, Daniel replied smoothly. We won't be needing additional security this evening. Reed's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sir, protocol dictates. I'm quite aware of protocol. Daniel cut him off. This evening is a deviation from it. I'll have my phone should any emergencies arise. Reed had no choice but to nod and step aside. As they passed, Elena caught his suspicious glance and realized that this outing would only intensify the scrutiny she faced from Anderson's inner circle. In the car, an awkward silence settled between them. Elena found herself studying Daniel's profile as he gazed out the window. In the fading evening light, the hard lines of his face seemed softened, revealing glimpses of the man he might have been before grief and distrust had reshaped him. You're wondering if this is another test, he said suddenly, still looking out the window. Elena started. It's a reasonable concern. He turned to face her. But no, Elena, this isn't a test. This is... He hesitated, seeming to search for the right words. This is an attempt to remember something I lost. What's that? His eyes met hers, surprisingly vulnerable. How to connect with another human being without suspicion as the starting point. The admission hung between them as the car pulled up to the glittering venue where the Richardson Gala was being held. Camera flashes illuminated the entrance as notable attendees arrived. Elena felt a flutter of nervousness. This world of wealth and influence was entirely foreign to her. As if sensing her anxiety, Daniel offered his arm. "Ready?" Elena took a deep breath and placed her hand on his arm. "Ready." Together they stepped from the car and into a night that would forever alter the carefully maintained boundaries between them. The Richardson Foundation Gala sparkled with wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the grand ballroom where New York's elite mingled, diamonds glittering on necks and wrists, champagne flowing freely. As Elena entered on Daniel's arm, she felt the immediate ripple of attention, curious glances, raised eyebrows, discreet whispers behind manicured hands. Daniel Anderson, notoriously private billionaire, had arrived with an unknown woman. Not a socialite, not a fellow CEO, not a celebrity, just Elena, the maid who had polished these people's water glasses when they dined at his home. "Mr. Anderson?" A silver-haired woman in emerald silk approached, her smile practiced and perfect. "What a delightful surprise. You rarely grace us with your presence." "Margaret," Daniel nodded politely. "The Richardson Foundation's work deserves support, especially this year's focus on immunotherapy research." The woman's gaze shifted to Elena, curiosity barely disguised as courtesy. "And your lovely companion?" "Elena Morales," Daniel said simply, offering no explanation for her presence. Elena extended her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "Indeed." Margaret's handshake was brief, her assessment swift. "Well, do enjoy the evening. The silent auction has some extraordinary items this year." As she glided away, Elena felt Daniel's hand press lightly against her lower back, guiding her further into the room. "That will happen all evening," he murmured close to her ear. "The curious, the judgmental, the opportunistic, all wondering who you are and what you mean to me." "And what should I tell them?" Elena asked. Daniel considered this. "The truth, perhaps. That you're someone who reminded me why Catherine supported this cause in the first place." Before Elena could respond, they were approached by a distinguished man in his 60s, Dr. James Richardson himself, founder of the foundation and renowned oncologist. "Daniel," he greeted warmly, genuine pleasure in his eyes. "It's been too long. Catherine would be pleased you're here." "James," Daniel's formal demeanor softened noticeably. "The research you're funding this year looks promising. We're hopeful." Richardson's gaze turned to Elena with genuine warmth, rather than the calculating assessment of the previous encounter. "And you've brought someone with a connection to our work, I understand." Elena looked at Daniel in surprise. He'd clearly communicated with Richardson before their arrival. "My sister volunteers at Memorial Children's Hospital," she explained, "in Catherine Anderson's wing." "Ah, Lucia Morales." Recognition lit Richardson's face. "Extraordinary woman. The children adore her." He turned to Daniel. "Your wife would have loved her approach. Treats those kids like people, not patients." Something flashed in Daniel's eyes. Pain, perhaps, or recognition. That was Catherine's philosophy as well. Indeed it was. Richardson squeezed Daniel's shoulder briefly. "She'd be proud of the wing, Daniel. Of the lives it's changing." As the evening progressed, Elena found herself navigating this unfamiliar world with increasing confidence. Daniel remained close, introducing her to select guests, mostly researchers and medical professionals, rather than the wealthy donors dominating the room. In their company, he seemed more engaged, more present than the distant employer she had known for 6 years. During a momentary lull, they found themselves by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. Elena sipped champagne, watching Daniel as he watched the crowd. "Why did you really bring me here tonight?" she asked quietly. Daniel turned to her, something unreadable in his expression. "Because you see people, Elena. Not opportunities or threats or assets, just people." He gazed back at the glittering assembly. "I've forgotten how to do that." "I don't think you have," she countered gently. "You've just been protecting yourself for so long it became a habit." He considered this. "Perhaps. After Catherine died, I built walls. Around myself, around my home, around what remained of my heart. I tested people because I expected them to fail, and when they did, it justified my isolation." "And when I didn't fail?" Elena asked. Daniel's gaze returned to her, intense and searching. "You challenged everything I've come to believe about human nature. Not just by passing the test, but by quietly giving to others when you had so little yourself. The moment between them deepened, charged with something neither had anticipated. Elena found herself suddenly aware of how close they stood, how the subtle scent of his cologne mingled with the champagne on her breath, how his eyes reflected the city lights behind her. Then a familiar voice shattered the moment. Well, this explains a lot. Sophia stood before them, stunning in a form-fitting red gown, her expression a careful mask that didn't quite hide her displeasure. "Sophia," Daniel acknowledged, his tone cooling noticeably. "I wasn't aware you were attending tonight." Clearly, her smile was brittle as her gaze flicked to Elena. "When you mentioned having a guest for the gala, I assumed it would be someone from your actual social circle, not your household staff." Elena felt Daniel tense beside her. "Elena is here because she has a personal connection to the cause," he said evenly. "Something many attendees tonight cannot claim." Sophia's perfectly arched eyebrow rose. "How fascinating. And does this personal connection extend to other areas of your life now, Daniel? The staff is already talking. Then perhaps the staff should focus on their duties rather than speculation," Daniel replied, his voice carrying an edge Elena had rarely heard. "Elena, would you like to view the silent auction items?" Taking her cue, Elena nodded. "Yes, I'd like that." As Daniel guided her away, Sophia called after them, "Just remember, Daniel, mixing business with pleasure rarely ends well for anyone involved." Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks at the implication. Daniel's hand at her back stiffened momentarily, then relaxed as they moved through the crowd. "I apologize for Sophia," he said once they were out of earshot. "That was unprofessional and inappropriate." "She's protective of you," Elena observed, "and concerned about boundaries being crossed." Daniel stopped, turning to face her fully. "Are you concerned about boundaries, Elena?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. "I think it's natural to be cautious when established patterns change suddenly." He studied her face, seeming to weigh her diplomatic response. "A fair assessment, though suddenly isn't entirely accurate, is it? 6 years is hardly impulsive." Before Elena could process what he might mean by this, the evening's formal program began. They found their seats at a table near the stage, where Dr. Richardson introduced a series of speakers, researchers, physicians, and finally, a 10-year-old girl named Lily who had survived cancer thanks to an experimental treatment funded by the foundation. As Lily spoke of her experience with simple, powerful honesty, Elena noticed Daniel's hand gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. Without thinking, she placed her hand over his. He startled slightly at the contact, but didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his palm upward, fingers curling around hers in a gentle hold that lasted until the speeches concluded. When the formal dinner ended and the orchestra began playing, couples moved to the dance floor. Daniel turned to Elena. "Would you care to dance?" The request was casual, his tone light, but his eyes held an intensity that made the simple question feel significant. "I'd like that," she replied softly. On the dance floor, Daniel's hand settled at her waist, the other holding hers with surprising gentleness. He led with the confidence of a man accustomed to control, yet there was nothing possessive in his touch. "I'm not very good at this," Elena admitted as they began moving to the music. "Dancing wasn't part of my training." The corner of his mouth lifted in a ghost of a smile. "You're doing fine." After a pause, he added, "Catherine loved to dance. At events like this, she would insist we stay until the very last song." "You must miss her very much," Elena said quietly. Daniel's eyes met hers, vulnerability visible for a moment before being carefully tucked away. "Every day. But tonight is the first time in years I've been able to think of her without that grief overshadowing everything else." They continued dancing, the space between them gradually diminishing as the music flowed. Elena became acutely aware of the warmth of his hand at her waist, the subtle cologne that seemed to surround them, the way his eyes never left her face. "People are watching us," she murmured, catching glimpses of curious onlookers. "Let them," he replied. "I stopped caring about others' opinions long ago. Even Sophia's?" Something hardened in his expression. "Especially Sophia's. She oversteps. She's concerned," Elena said gently, "about what this means." Daniel's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "And what does this mean, Elena?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. Elena chose her words carefully. "I think it means you're ready to reconnect with the world, to honor Catherine's memory by living rather than just existing." His expression softened, perceptive, as always. The music began to fade, and he slowed their movement, but incomplete. Before she could ask what he meant, Dr. Richardson approached them as the dance ended. "Daniel, I hate to interrupt, but there's someone you should meet. Dr. Chen from Stanford. His team is doing remarkable work with pediatric immunotherapy." Daniel nodded. "Of course." He turned to Elena. "Will you excuse me for a moment?" As he walked away with Richardson, Elena made her way to the edge of the ballroom, finding a quiet spot to gather her thoughts. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, shifting the ground beneath her feet. The way Daniel had looked at her while they danced, the warmth of his hand in hers, it suggested possibilities she had never allowed herself to consider. Quite the Cinderella story. Sophia stood beside her suddenly, 2 champagne flutes in hand. She offered one to Elena, who hesitated before accepting it. "I'm not sure what you mean," Elena said carefully. Sophia's laugh was musical but sharp. "Please, the maid at the ball, dancing with the billionaire? It's positively fairy tale." She sipped her champagne. "I'm just wondering which version we're living. The one with the happy ending, or the one where the clock strikes midnight and everything returns to reality?" "This isn't a fairy tale," Elena replied evenly. "Mr. Anderson invited me because of my connection to the hospital." "Daniel," Sophia corrected. "You were calling him Daniel on the dance floor." Her perfectly painted lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. 6 years, Elena. 6 years I've worked alongside him, watched him rebuild after Catherine's death, protected his interests, anticipated his needs. Then you return his credit card and suddenly you're his gala date. It's not what you're implying, isn't it?" Sophia's gaze was penetrating. "I've seen how he looks at you tonight, how he's always looked at you, if I'm being honest. You've just never noticed." Elena's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? Why do you think you've lasted 6 years when no one else has?" Sophia shook her head. "It was never about your work performance, though you are irritatingly perfect. It's because from the moment you arrived, something about you reminded him of what he lost." Before Elena could respond, Sophia's attention shifted to something over Elena's shoulder. "And speaking of things lost and found, your past seems to be catching up with you." Elena turned and froze. Walking toward them, elegant in a simple black dress, was Lucia. Elena stared in disbelief as her sister approached. Elegant and composed in a simple black dress that somehow looked as sophisticated as the designer gowns surrounding them. "Lucia," she breathed. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," Lucia replied, her eyes darting briefly to Sophia before returning to her sister. "Dr. Richardson asked several hospital volunteers to attend. I didn't know you would be here until I saw you on the dance floor." Sophia's smile turned predatory. "How fascinating. The Morales sisters, both with connections to the great Daniel Anderson." She raised her glass in a mock toast. "I'll leave you two to catch up. I'm sure you have much to discuss." As Sophia glided away, Lucia took Elena's arm and guided her to a quieter corner. "Elena, what's happening? I saw you dancing with him. The way he was looking at you." "It's complicated," Elena admitted, still processing Sophia's words. "Everything's changed in the last few days. After the hospital, after he discovered our connection to Catherine's wing, he's different." Lucia's expression remained skeptical. "Men like Anderson don't change overnight, Elena. I told you that. It hasn't been overnight. It's been 6 years. Elena found herself defending him, surprising herself. He's been locked behind walls since Catherine died. Maybe he's finally ready to step out from behind them. And he's chosen you to step out with? Lucia's protective instincts were clearly engaged. "The timing seems convenient. Right after discovering you've been hiding things from him." "What are you suggesting?" Lucia sighed. "I don't know. But powerful men don't suddenly invite their housekeepers to galas because they return a credit card. There's more to this." Before Elena could respond, she felt a presence behind her. Daniel had returned, his expression carefully neutral as he regarded Lucia. "Ms. Morales," he greeted her. "Dr. Richardson mentioned you might be here tonight." "Mr. Anderson." Lucia's tone was polite but cool. "Thank you for your continued support of the children's wing. It makes a tremendous difference." "The work you do there makes the difference," he replied. "I simply provide resources." An awkward silence fell between them, charged with unspoken thoughts. Daniel broke it first, turning to Elena. "The closing remarks will begin soon. Shall we find our seats?" Elena glanced at her sister, torn. "Lucia." "Go," Lucia said gently. "We'll talk tomorrow." As they walked away, Daniel leaned closer to Elena. "Your sister doesn't approve of your being here with me." "She's protective," Elena replied. "She doesn't want to see me hurt." "And is that what you expect from me? To hurt you?" His question was soft but direct. Elena met his gaze. I don't know what to expect anymore. Everything that seemed clear a week ago is now. She trailed off. Complicated? He finished for her. Yes. They reached their table as Dr. Richardson took the stage for closing remarks, announcing the night's fundraising total, a record-breaking $17 million. Applause filled the ballroom, celebrations that continued as the evening began winding down. As the event concluded, Daniel guided Elena through the thinning crowd toward the exit. Several guests stopped them to say goodnight, curious eyes lingering on Elena, speculation evident in their expressions. She maintained her composure, though the weight of their scrutiny was exhausting. Outside, the night air was cool against her skin as they waited for the car. Daniel stood close beside her, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. So much had changed in so little time. Elena, he said suddenly, his voice low, I need to tell you something. She turned to him, struck by the intensity in his expression. What is it? Before he could continue, the car pulled up alongside them. The driver stepped out, and Elena found herself looking at Jensen, Anderson's former driver, who had been fired mid-flight from Tokyo. Jensen nodded politely. Mr. Anderson, Ms. Morales. Elena glanced at Daniel in confusion. Jensen? I thought that I fired him? Daniel finished, opening the car door for her. I did, and then I rehired him yesterday, with a substantial raise and an apology. As they settled into the car, Elena tried to process this new development. You rehired him, she repeated. Why? Daniel was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city as they pulled away from the venue. Because you were right, he said finally, about seeing people, about what matters. He turned to her, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. Jensen has a daughter in college. His work has always been exemplary. Firing him for a momentary lapse in protocol was excessive. What changed? I did, he said simply. Or rather, I'm trying to. The rest of the drive passed in contemplative silence, the city lights casting shifting patterns across their faces. When they arrived at the estate, Daniel walked her to her quarters above the garage, an unprecedented gesture that felt significant. At her door, Elena turned to him. Thank you for tonight. It was. She searched for the right word. Illuminating. Indeed it was. His eyes held hers, something unspoken passing between them. Elena, what Sophia said to you, you saw that? I see more than people realize. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Whatever she said, know that this evening wasn't a test or a game. It was perhaps the most honest interaction I've had with another person in 5 years. He hesitated, then reached out slowly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with surprising gentleness. The touch was brief, almost tentative, yet it sent warmth spreading through her. Good night, Elena, he said softly, stepping back. Good night, Daniel. As she closed the door behind her, Elena leaned against it, heart racing with possibilities she had never dared consider before tonight. Everything had changed. The careful boundaries between employer and employee blurred beyond recognition. What would tomorrow bring? And was she ready for whatever it might be? Across the estate, Daniel Anderson stood in Catherine's old study, a room Elena had never been permitted to enter. The walls were lined with photographs of a smiling woman with kind eyes, moments of a life cut tragically short. He picked up a silver frame from the desk, Catherine's laughing face captured in a moment of perfect joy. I think you would have liked her, he said softly to the photograph. She reminds me of you in some ways, not in appearance but in essence, in how she sees the world. He placed the frame back carefully, his decision made. Tomorrow would mark a new chapter, for himself, for Elena, for the carefully ordered world he had maintained since losing Catherine. It was time to step out from behind the walls he had built, to risk connection again. The question was whether Elena would be willing to take that risk with him. Morning light streamed through the windows of Elena's quarters, waking her earlier than usual. For a moment, disoriented from dreams, she forgot the events of the previous night. Then memory returned in a rush. The gala, the dance, Daniel's gentle touch at her door. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucia. We need to talk. Coffee at my place, 10 a.m.? Elena replied with a quick affirmative, then rose to prepare for the day. Saturday meant lighter duties at the main house, typically just a check of the common areas and preparing Anderson's weekend breakfast. But nothing felt typical anymore. What was the protocol when you danced with your employer at a charity gala? when he'd touched your face with a tenderness that suggested something beyond professional boundaries. As she dressed in her casual weekend clothes, jeans and a simple blouse rather than her uniform, another text arrived. This one from Daniel. My study, 9 a.m. if convenient. We need to talk. 4 simple words that set her heart racing. We need to talk. The phrase that had ended relationships, changed lives, altered trajectories. What did it mean coming from Daniel Anderson? At precisely 9, Elena knocked on the study door, steeling herself for whatever conversation awaited. Come in, his voice called. Inside, Daniel stood by the window, casual in dark jeans and a gray sweater that echoed his eyes. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. Elena, he greeted her. Thank you for coming. Your message said we needed to talk, she replied, remaining near the door. Daniel gestured to the sitting area, 2 leather armchairs positioned before the fireplace. Please sit. As she did, Elena noticed changes to the study, subtle but significant. A photograph of Catherine now sat on the side table, where before all personal items had been conspicuously absent. Several books that had always been precisely aligned on the shelves were now casually stacked on the coffee table. Daniel took the chair opposite her, leaning forward slightly. Last night changed things between us, he began without preamble. I think we both felt it. Elena nodded, appreciating his directness. Yes. The question is what happens now. His gaze was steady, focused entirely on her. I've spent 6 years hiding behind walls, Elena, testing people until they failed, keeping everyone at a distance. It was easier than risking connection again. And now? She asked softly. Now I find myself wanting to tear those walls down. His voice carried a vulnerability she had never heard before, starting with the ones between us. Elena's heart quickened. Daniel, before you respond, he interrupted gently, there's something you should know. He rose and crossed to his desk, retrieving a folder which he handed to her. This arrived yesterday from my legal team. Confused, Elena opened the folder. Inside was a document titled Transfer of Ownership for a Small House in California. As she scanned the details, she gasped. The house was in her mother's name. I don't understand, she whispered. Your mother's rental property is being foreclosed due to medical debt, Daniel explained. I've purchased it and transferred ownership back to her, with all debts cleared. Elena stared at him, emotions warring within her. Gratitude, confusion, and a flicker of something darker. Why would you do this? Because I could, he answered simply. Because it mattered to you. I can't accept this. She closed the folder, hands trembling slightly. It's too much. Daniel's brow furrowed. You're upset. I'm overwhelmed, she corrected, and confused about what this means, about what you want from me in return. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like hurt. You think this is transactional, that I'm buying your affection? Isn't that what billionaires do? The words escaped before she could stop them. Solve problems with money? Fix people's lives to gain their loyalty? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Is that who you think I am, after 6 years? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Elena thought of the man she had observed all these years, demanding, exacting, walled off from genuine connection, but also the man she'd glimpsed recently, vulnerable, capable of change, seeking redemption. I think you're someone trying to find your way back to humanity, she said finally. But this gesture, however generous, complicates things between us. Because you feel indebted? Because it creates an imbalance, she explained. Last night felt like 2 people connecting as equals despite all our differences. This, she gestured to the folder, reminds me of exactly how unequal our positions are. Daniel considered her words, then nodded slowly. I didn't see it that way, but I understand your perspective. He leaned forward, eyes intent on hers. What if there was a way to address that imbalance? How? By offering you a choice that has nothing to do with my wealth or your employment. He reached for her hand, his touch light but certain. Elena Morales, would you have dinner with me? Not as my employee, not as a charity case, but as a woman I've come to admire deeply. A woman I'd like to know beyond the role she's played in my home. The simple request, delivered with such earnestness, caught her off guard. You're asking me on a date? A smile touched his lips. Yes, I believe that's the conventional term. But I work for you, she pointed out, though her hand remained in his. Details can be arranged, he replied. If your concern is the imbalance of power, I'm prepared to address it. You could transfer to the Catherine Anderson Foundation. Same salary, better benefits, reporting to the board rather than to me. Or, his voice softened, if you prefer complete separation, I have connections at several corporations looking for someone with your management skills and integrity. Elena's eyes widened. You've thought this through. I've thought of little else since discovering the truth about your sister, he admitted. About what it means that two women connected to Catherine's story have been in my life all this time, unseen. And what does it mean? Daniel's expression turned reflective, that perhaps the walls I built to protect myself have actually been keeping me from healing, from living. His thumb traced a gentle pattern on her palm, from finding connection again. Elena felt the weight of the moment, the crossroads before them. 6 years of carefully maintained professional distance dissolving into something new, uncertain and full of possibility. If I say yes to dinner, she said carefully, it doesn't mean I'm saying yes to everything else. We would need to proceed slowly, mindfully. I've waited 6 years to truly see what was right in front of me, Daniel replied. I can be patient now. Elena withdrew her hand gently, needing space to think clearly. And what about my mother's house? The house is hers regardless of your decision, he said firmly. It was never meant as leverage, Elena. It was simply something I could do to help someone who matters to you. She studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, finding only sincerity. After a moment, she made her decision. Yes, she said softly. Yes to dinner, as equals finding our way forward. The smile that transformed Daniel's face was unlike any expression she'd seen from him before. Open, genuinely joyful. Years of grief and isolation temporarily lifted. Thank you, he said simply. As Elena left the study to meet Lucia, she felt lighter than she had in years. The future stretched before her, uncertain but filled with possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. In the mansion where silence had once meant obedience, where she had learned to keep her head down and her words short, Elena Morales had finally been seen. Not as a maid, not as an employee, but as herself, a woman of quiet strength, unwavering integrity, and a heart capable of awakening another from a long winter of grief. What had begun as a test of her honesty had become something neither of them could have anticipated. A second chance at connection for them both. The billionaire who had forgotten how to trust and the maid who had reminded him what truly mattered had found an unexpected path forward, together. As the morning sun illuminated the grounds of the Anderson estate, its light seemed to symbolize the dawn of something new, not just for Elena and Daniel but for all whose lives they touched. From Catherine's legacy at the hospital to the renewed compassion in Daniel's business dealings, the ripples of their connection would extend far beyond the walls that had once divided them. Some people, it seemed, didn't need money to show their worth. They just needed a chance to be seen. And sometimes those who seemed to have everything were actually the ones most in need of that simple human gift, to be truly seen and still accepted. In the end, that was the most valuable currency of all.